My domineering wife Victoria and her male assistant were playing their games, from the office to the rooftop of the company, from the car to the outdoors. He called her Greedy Ethan, and she called him Frisky. Their scandalous escapades were no secret. During their trysts, they even had employees deliver protection to them. Despite all this, Victoria was convinced I knew nothing. She once said to me, "As long as you're still sincere, I'll never let you leave me." But I'd already changed my name and planned everything. "Mr. S, are you sure you want to change your name? Once it's changed, your academic records, certificates, and passport will all need updating," the clerk said. I nodded firmly. "Yes, I'm sure." The staff member tried to dissuade me. "Changing your name as an adult can be quite troublesome. Besides, your current name sounds lovely." "Are you absolutely certain?" "Certain," I replied without hesitation. I signed the name change agreement and said, "Thank you. All right, the name you're changing to is Sean, correct?" "Yes," I confirmed. "Sean, as in flying far away. That's my vision for the future, to leave this place completely."
"Can I update my passport name now?" I asked.
"You can," the clerk replied. "Here's your name change receipt. Take this to the counter downstairs to update your passport." I quickly updated my passport. As for the other documents, diplomas, certificates, household registration, I left them untouched. After all, in a week's time, I would be leaving with my new passport. My old identity could stay in the past. I didn't need it anymore. As I stepped out of the municipal office with my new passport, I saw the city's landmark building across the street. The massive screen on the skyscraper's facade was broadcasting an interview with Victoria, the president of the Prosperity Group. The host, quick to notice subtle details, smiled and asked, "Vicky, I see you keep touching your ring, but it looks like just an ordinary silver ring. Is there something special about it?" Victoria smiled warmly as she raised her hand to show it off. "This is my wedding ring," she said. The host looked surprised. "Oh, I assumed that with your wealth, your wedding ring would be a diamond and not a small one at that." Victoria replied, "I made this wedding ring myself. I shaped and polished it bit by bit, and even engraved the inner band with my husband's and my names. Wow, there really are 2 sets of initials, LRI and JBD, Victoria completed for him. "My husband's name is Sincere." The host exclaimed, "Wow, your husband is so lucky. He must have saved the galaxy in his past life to win your love, Vicky." Victoria simply smiled and said, "Actually, I must have saved the galaxy to marry him." The crowd of onlookers murmured in admiration, but I, the man in question, Sincere, could only let out a bitter laugh. Victoria and I truly had been deeply in love once. From wearing school uniforms to walking down the aisle, we'd spent 15 years together. To our classmates and teachers, we had been the perfect couple. But 2 months ago, I received a photo from a stranger. In the picture, a young man, probably no older than 20, stood wearing nothing but a pair of tight swim trunks. His neck and chest were covered in hickeys. Anyone could tell he'd just been through a passionate encounter. He flashed a V sign at the camera, and on his index finger was a silver ring. The ring bore an engraving, LRI and JBD. Later, I met the boy in Victoria's office. His name was Ethan. Fresh out of college, he was 21 and had just been hired as Victoria's personal assistant. In that moment, my mind went blank. I wanted so badly to storm into Victoria's office and ask, "Does personal assistant include nighttime duties too?" But I held back. The marks on Ethan's body in that photo had already given me the answer. Amid the murmurs of admiration and envy from the crowd, I walked away, heading straight to a jewelry workshop. When I removed my wedding ring from my left hand, the pain was searing. The jeweler asked, "Sir, what would you like to have made?" I replied, "This ring, melt it down." He hesitated. "But this ring has an engraving. It must hold a lot of sentimental value. Are you sure you want to melt it?" "Yes," I said. "Please do it quickly." Half an hour later, I left the shop with a neatly packaged jewelry box. Victoria came home past 10 that night, holding a bouquet of flowers. She said, "Sorry, Sincere. Work's been hectic lately and I haven't had time for you. I brought your favorite freesias. Do you like them? As she leaned closer, I caught a faint whiff of men's cologne on her. When I turned my head, I saw a small red love bite on her neck. It was conspicuous. I let out a cold laugh. Was she busy with work or busy rolling in the sheets with Ethan? She asked, "Why aren't you saying anything?" I pushed her away and replied, "Just tired." "Then let's go rest," she suggested. I pushed her away again. "You must be tired too. Take a shower and get some sleep." Victoria reached out to hold my hand but suddenly noticed something. "Sincere, where's your wedding ring?" "I took it off," I said. "But I made that ring with my own hands. It's a symbol of our love." "Why would you take it off?" I deflected. "Recently I've put on some weight and my ring no longer fits." Victoria's expression softened and a smile returned to her face. She said, "Then I'll take it to the jewelry store someday to get it resized." I replied, "We'll see." She asked, "By the way, what's that on the table?" Victoria pointed at the delicate jewelry box on the table, her tone tinged with surprise. "Sincere, is this a gift for me?" I nodded. "Yes. Inside is a small piece of silver." I melted down our wedding ring and put it in there. To my surprise, Victoria seemed genuinely happy. "What's the occasion?" My husband prepared a gift for me. My heart sank even further. I said, "Today is our wedding anniversary." Her face went pale in an instant. Almost pleadingly, she said, "I'm so sorry, Sincere. Work has been really busy lately. How about we go out for dinner tonight? I'll book a table right now." I replied, "No need, I've already eaten." She said, "Then let's go out and enjoy the night view, take a walk by the river." "I'm tired. I want to sleep." From behind, Victoria wrapped her arms around my waist, trying to please me. "Come on, Sincere, we haven't taken a walk together in ages. I feel like you've been a bit cold to me lately. If this keeps up, I might start suspecting my Sincere has fallen out of love with me." "Have I fallen out of love?" "No, it was her heart that first drifted away. She let someone else into her world, and this time I've decided to take back my heart, along with myself, completely." On the way out, Victoria drove the car. She kept smiling and chatting about recent happenings. I sat in the passenger seat, my head turned to look out the window, ignoring her chatter. While fastening my seatbelt earlier, I had felt something in the gap of the passenger seat. I pulled it out and saw a torn pair of stockings. I quietly stuffed it back in, pretending nothing had happened. Since I've decided to leave, I didn't want to argue anymore. There's no point in uncovering more lies. If she refuses to offer the truth, I'd rather not ask. When we arrived at the riverbank, Victoria got out first and opened the door for me. "Sincere, we're here." I didn't want to come, but this riverbank was where we used to visit often in the beginning. If it started here, it might as well end here. Someone nearby exclaimed, "Oh my gosh, isn't that Vicky from today's TV segment? The one who made her wedding ring by hand? I remember. She's so beautiful and gentle, such a perfect wife. They're such a sweet couple." As they gushed, Victoria's phone rang. She looked at me apologetically. "Sorry, Sincere, work call. I'll take it and be quick." I replied. "Go ahead," she said. "Wait for me here, okay?" The crowd around us continued with their exclamations. "So loving. My faith in love is restored." But I stood there, expressionless, gazing at the shimmering surface of the river under the night sky. When Victoria saw the caller ID earlier, she couldn't suppress the smile at the corners of her mouth. It was a smile filled with affection, sweetness, and a hint of mischief. How could that possibly be work-related? I didn't bother exposing her. The river breeze was chilly, so I went back to the car to wait. On the car's screen, Victoria's social media account was still logged in, synced with her phone. Messages kept popping up one after another. The person she was chatting with was named Greedy Ethan. Victoria had written, "Miss me?" Hungry Ethan replied, "Nights without you feel so empty." Victoria responded, "Frisky, I made you do it 7 times today. Isn't that enough?" Hungry Ethan wrote back, "Not enough. When night falls, I start thinking about you. Victoria replied, All right, tomorrow at work in the office, I'll make it up to you. Hungry Ethan wrote, Deal. Don't forget to wear stockings. I like them. The conversation grew increasingly explicit, filled with vulgarities and flirtation. I felt a coldness seep through my entire body. My hands trembled as I closed the screen. I couldn't tell if I was shaking from the cold or from anger, but I clenched my fists so tightly that my nails dug into my skin. Victoria returned about 15 minutes later. As she got into the car, she clutched her chest and let out a heavy sigh of relief. I didn't see you when I turned around after the call. You scared me. I couldn't bear to look at her deceitful face anymore. I kept my head down, staring at my hands. It was cold outside, so I came back to the car, I said. She replied, That's fine, wherever you're comfortable. Suddenly I raised my head. After reading their messages, her words took on a different meaning. Wherever you're comfortable. The torn stockings in the gap of the passenger seat. Could it be? They had done it here, in this seat? A wave of nausea hit me. I pushed the car door open and vomited. Victoria was alarmed and hurried over to check on me. Sincere, what's wrong? I vomited until I was dizzy, unable to regain my composure for a long time. I couldn't understand. Why would Victoria, who once loved me so deeply, cheat on me? Wasn't she afraid I'd find out? Or did she think she was so discreet that I'd never uncover the truth? The night breeze cleared my mind a little. Victoria asked, Are you okay, Sincere? If you're not feeling well, I can take you to the hospital right now. I replied, No need. Maybe I just ate something bad. She said, All right, come visit me at the office tomorrow, and we can have lunch together. I let out a cold laugh. Visit the office to see you and Ethan? Having a steamy affair in the office? The thought struck me like a prank, and I couldn't help but say, Sure, I'll go to the office with you tomorrow morning. I'll keep you company while you work. We'll have lunch together, and then head home together in the evening. Victoria was caught off guard by my sudden willingness and seemed a bit uneasy. But I've been really busy at work lately. I might not be able to stay with you the whole time, she replied. That's fine. You do your thing. I'll just wait in your office until you're back, I said. All right then, she reluctantly agreed. Once we got home, Victoria offered to run me a bath. She went into the bathroom, unusually closing the door behind her. I went downstairs instead, got into the car and started the engine. The dashboard screen lit up with the latest chat messages. Victoria had texted, Change of plans, we can't use the office tomorrow. Hungry Ethan replied, Ugh, so disappointing. Victoria wrote back, Don't be sad, Frisky. Tomorrow we'll do it on the rooftop. Even more thrilling. Hungry Ethan replied, Yay! When I returned to the bedroom, Victoria was just stepping out of the bathroom. Sincere, the bath is ready. Go soak for a bit, she said. No, I think I'll just rest, I responded. All right, if you're tired, go to sleep. Oh, by the way, can I open the gift you left on the table now? She asked. Wait a week, I replied. Why wait a week? I'm dying to see what my dear Sincere has prepared for me, she said, her curiosity evident. I thought to myself, because in a week, I'll be gone from your life forever. But instead I simply said, because in a week, it'll hold more meaning. Victoria leaned in, planted a soft kiss on my lips and said, All right, whatever you say. The next morning, Victoria's phone started ringing just after 6. She hit the button to silence it, then turned over to hug me. Ignore it, let's sleep a bit longer, she murmured. But the phone rang again, stubbornly persistent. Annoyed, she frowned and said, It's not even working hours yet. Why are they so pushy? I swear, one day I'm going to fire all those useless executives. She silenced the phone again, only for it to ring a third time. Frustrated, she got out of bed. Honey, keep sleeping. I'll go see what's so urgent, she said. I mumbled an acknowledgement and turned away from her. Victoria took her phone downstairs. Moments later, I saw her through the front door, talking to a delivery guy in a yellow uniform. He handed her a package. When she came back inside, her hands were empty. Is it something serious at work? I asked. Not really. Don't worry about it, honey. Relax and rest. I'll make you breakfast, she replied. Perhaps out of guilt or genuine concern for my well-being, Victoria prepared an unusually lavish breakfast. Milk, eggs, toast, jam, and even my favorite oatmeal. You really shouldn't eat random things anymore. I'll hire a housekeeper to cook for you every day, she said. No need, I replied. Be good, honey. Listen to me or I'll worry about you while I'm at work, she insisted. Victoria, can I ask you something? I said, of course. I set down my fork and asked casually, do you think the 7-year itch is real? Her expression instantly turned disdainful. That's just an excuse for unfaithful women to cheat. I'm not like that. I'll only ever love you sincere. I chuckled. Only me for life? Yes, for life, she said firmly. And what if you fall in love with someone else? I asked. Then may lightning strike me down where I stand, she said with conviction. I scoffed. That's quite the heavy vow. Aren't you afraid it might come true? I'm telling the truth. Why would I be afraid? She shot back. I picked up my fork again and began spreading jam on my toast. Honey, you have to believe me, she said. I simply replied, let's eat. You don't believe me, do you? What do I have to do to prove it? Cut open my heart and show it to you, she exclaimed. Your employees are probably waiting for you. Don't be late, I said. Relieved, she finally relaxed and sat down across from me. Let them wait. They're all useless anyway. I'll fire them sooner or later. Fire him, could you bear to? I asked, emphasizing the singular pronoun. Whether she caught the implication or not, she only replied, there's nothing I wouldn't give up, except for you. After breakfast, we headed to her office together. I insisted on sitting in the back seat, claiming I felt carsick and preferred the fresh air. Victoria didn't push me on it. All right, I'll drive carefully, she said. When we arrived at the office, Victoria hurried to open the car door for me. As I got out, employees commuting during rush hour turned to stare. A few executives even jogged over to greet me. Mr. S is here. Vicky's always talking about how you love coffee. Let me grab some for you, one of them said eagerly. Another chimed in, I'll go get sushi. Vicky mentioned it's your favorite. Victoria laughed and said, you guys need to stop feeding him. My husband's gained a bit of weight. His wedding ring doesn't even fit anymore. Oh no, Vicky, that can't be true. Mr. S looks as slim as ever. It must be the ring, it must have shrunk. Go. Don't just stand around flattering him. Get to work, Victoria said, shooing them away. You're taking pictures way too obviously. How could money shrink? You just don't get it, Victoria replied with a smile, her tone as patient as ever. As long as Mr. S is happy, I'm happy. And when I'm happy, doesn't everyone have a good time too? The room erupted into laughter. All right. You all know my weak spot, Victoria said good-naturedly. I was practically ushered into Victoria's office by the group. The space was luxurious. Fruits, snacks, coffee, everything you could think of. Victoria even pulled up a soccer match on her computer for me. Darling, I've got to get back to work, she said with a soft smile. Just enjoy yourself here, and if you need anything, just ask the assistant outside. Feigning casualness, I asked, where's Ethan, your personal assistant? Haven't seen him around today. I'm not sure, Victoria replied. I'll have HR give him a call and check in. Before leaving, she gently ran her fingers through my hair and whispered, wait for me. We'll have lunch together when I'm back. Once she'd left, along with the other executives, I noticed her phone lying on the desk. Grabbing it, I hurried out after her, only to overhear a conversation between a few of the executives in the hallway. Man, Victoria and Ethan are getting bolder. What can you do, though? Who could have predicted that Mr. S would randomly show up at the office today? They had to change venues to the rooftop, huh? One of them chuckled. Should we still send up those condoms for Victoria? Another asked. No need, someone else chimed in, laughing. I saw her pocketing a few boxes when she went up earlier. She's really something, huh? Even under her husband's nose, she's fully prepared. Well, delivery services are so convenient these days. You can get anything you need with just a call, another joked. It all clicked for me in that moment. Those persistent morning calls weren't random. They were from a delivery guy. Victoria had placed an order first thing in the morning, getting ready for today's rooftop rendezvous. She'd been planning this for hours. "Do you think a few boxes are enough?" one of them teased. Last time, Victoria and Ethan were at it in the car for a full day and night. She could barely walk straight the next day at work. "Well, if they run out, we can always send more. It's our job to keep the boss happy, right?" Another voice interjected. "Weren't you just saying we need to take care of Mr. S too? He's easy to deal with," someone scoffed. "A cup of coffee, and he's good to go. Come on. With Victoria's status and power, who wouldn't have a few boy toys on the side? It's normal as long as she keeps it under wraps from her husband." True, he seems so naive. It probably wouldn't be hard to keep him in the dark. Another laughed. Just then, Victoria appeared at the end of the hallway. "You'd better not say anything inappropriate in front of my husband. Got it?" The executives quickly nodded. "Understood, Victoria. We know the drill." One of them hesitated before asking, "Why did you bring Mr. S to the office today anyway?" "Now you and Ethan have to sneak around on the rooftop and we've got to watch every word we say." Victoria shot him a sharp glare. "Sincere is my husband. He can come here whenever he wants. Do I need to explain myself to you?" "No, of course not," they stammered. With a stern face, Victoria added, "Take care of Sincere. He had an upset stomach yesterday, so don't let him eat anything cold. And as for my business with Ethan, if anyone dares to spill a word, you're out of here. Got it?" The executives nodded eagerly, their expressions a mix of fear and sycophantic smiles. I didn't wait to hear more. I quickly returned to Victoria's office and placed her phone back among the pile of snacks. A few moments later, she walked in, her usual warmth back on display. "Hungry, Ethan? What are you eating that smells so good?" The nickname sent a shiver down my spine, but I forced myself to stay composed. "I thought you were in a meeting. Why are you back so soon?" I asked. She rummaged through the snacks and pulled out her phone. "I left my phone in here. Found it," she said with a laugh. "All right, you enjoy yourself. I'll be back later." As she left, my phone rang. It was a travel agent. "Hello, is this Sean?" "Yes, this is Sean," I replied. "Mr. Sean, we've successfully booked your flight to Norway for next week. Just bring your passport to the airport for boarding." "Do I need any other documents besides my passport?" I asked. "No, just your passport will do." "Got it, thank you." Hanging up, I noticed Victoria watching me with a hint of suspicion. "Passport? Darling, what do you need a passport for?" she asked. "Oh, it's for a friend," I lied. "He lost his and needed advice on how to get a new one." Relieved, Victoria stepped closer and embraced me tightly. "You scared me. I thought you were planning to leave the country without me." Her scent overwhelmed me, a sickly blend of sweetness, sweat, and a lingering hint of men's cologne and cigarettes. I turned my head and discreetly gagged. Victoria, noticing my discomfort, gently patted my back. "What did they feed you this time?" "I specifically told them to be careful with your stomach these past few days." "Wait here. I'll go fire the lot of them." Mustered every ounce of strength, I pushed her away. "Fire whoever you want, but stop pretending it's for my sake," I snapped. Victoria seemed taken aback by my sudden outburst. "Darling, are you upset with me? Is it because I've been too busy to spend time with you today?" She softened her tone. "How about this? Tomorrow, I'll clear my entire schedule and spend the whole day with you. Would that make you happy?" I let out a bitter laugh. I asked, "Only stay with me?" "Yes, only with you." I took a deep breath and exhaled slowly. "I hope you'll keep your word." That night, for some unknown reason, it started pouring rain. From the moment I returned home, I couldn't stop vomiting. Victoria tried to approach me, but I pushed her away harshly. "Don't come near me," I said. "The smell on you makes it worse." Victoria sniffed her sleeve. "Maybe you don't like this perfume. I'll try another one next time." I replied coldly, "Victoria, you know very well it's not about the perfume." She smiled sheepishly. "All right, don't be mad. I won't wear any perfume anymore. Is that okay?" I splashed cold water on my face and looked at my reflection in the mirror. Beyond the bathroom door, Victoria stood anxiously holding a cup of hot water. I couldn't understand. How could she still act so sincerely in love with me while carrying the cloying scent of intimacy with someone else on her skin? How could she betray our relationship so brazenly, yet still seem to care about me? Was it true what they said about people with power and money? That they treated relationships like disposable toys? Did she think I was someone easy to fool? She had underestimated me. I wasn't that gullible, nor would I compromise my principles. If this wasn't wholehearted love, I didn't want any part of it. The next morning, Victoria took me to the hospital. After a series of tests, the doctor concluded it was stress-induced gastroenteritis. What's stress-induced gastroenteritis? Victoria asked. It means the patient has experienced significant emotional stress, which has severely impacted their digestive system and caused the vomiting, the doctor explained. Victoria turned to me. Sincere, have you been upset about something recently? Tell me, maybe I can help. I looked away, avoiding her attempt to get close. You can't help. Just try me, she insisted. There's very little I can't fix. Of course, this was the one thing only she could fix. For a fleeting moment, I wanted to ask her, if Ethan and I were both taken hostage, who would she save first? But then I remembered. I knew martial arts. I could save myself. I didn't need Victoria anymore. In Norway, I had applied to an art school under Sean's name. Years ago, I gave up my dream of painting to marry Victoria. From now on, I would live for myself. Darling, Victoria said, how about a movie this afternoon? There's a new comedy out that'll cheer you up. I raised an eyebrow. This afternoon? Don't you have work? You don't remember? She replied. We agreed I'd spend the whole day with you. I keep my promises. At that moment, her phone rang. She initially tried to silence it, but after glancing at the caller ID, she hesitated. I smirked. Go ahead, answer it. Work is important. Victoria hesitated, but eventually picked up the call in front of me. Didn't I tell you not to call me today? What's so urgent? I couldn't hear the other side clearly, but it sounded like a man complaining. Victoria's tone softened. All right, I understand. Just wait for me. After hanging up, she looked at me apologetically. Sincere, the company needs my signature on an important document. The manager's already downstairs with it. I'll just sign it quickly and be right back, half an hour at most. I nodded. Victoria practically ran out of the clinic. The doctor chuckled. Mr. S., your girlfriend really loves you. She's willing to drop everything for you. Is that so? I replied with a faint smile. Excuse me, doctor, I need to use the restroom. Of course. As I stepped out, I caught a glimpse of Victoria skipping the elevator and rushing down the stairs. She really did go downstairs, but the floor she headed to wasn't for administrative offices. It was the maternity ward. Buzz. My phone vibrated. A message from Ethan popped up. Mr. S., sorry, but she probably won't be able to stay with you today. One call from me, and she comes running to my side. More messages followed. Oh, and here's a picture of her ultrasound. She's pregnant with my child. I enlarged the image and read the text at the top of the document. 8-week embryo. Threatened miscarriage. Ethan continued. Yesterday we had countless rounds on the rooftop. Tried all sorts of positions. Maybe we overdid it and now the baby's at risk. She even said she was bored with the routine stuff at home with you. Told me she wanted something more thrilling with me. Don't worry though. I've told her to see a doctor immediately. After all, a baby's more important than gastroenteritis, don't you think? I took a cab to leave the hospital on my own and headed to a law firm. Hello, I said. I'd like to hire your firm to draft a divorce agreement for me. I didn't ask for anything, and the lawyer was very reliable. Within half an hour, I had a complete divorce agreement in my hands. The lawyer explained to me, no need for the wife's signature. As long as you've been separated for 2 years, this agreement becomes effective automatically. As I walked out of the law firm with the agreement, my phone rang. It was Victoria. Honey, where are you? I couldn't find you anywhere at the hospital, she said. I waited for you for a long time, but you didn't show up, so I went home, I replied. All right, as long as you got home safely. I'm sorry, honey, something urgent came up at work. and I had to deal with it personally. I might need to go on a business trip for a few days. Take care of yourself while I'm gone. Next week, I promise I'll clear my schedule and spend time with you, she said. I let out a heavy sigh. A lie told 1,000 times loses its power to deceive. At this point, I felt no emotional reaction. All right, you go ahead, I said. That's why I love you, Sincere. You're always so understanding, she replied. Love me? I asked. Victoria, do you just enjoy men who play games? Am I too boring for you? She hesitated for a moment. What? Of course not. I love you just the way you are, she said. Victoria, would you fall in love with another man? I pressed. Never, she answered immediately. If you ever do, I'll leave you forever, I said. She chuckled lightly, almost mockingly. Go ahead and try. I'll block every airport and train station. As long as your name is Sincere, I won't let you leave me, she said. I smiled bitterly to myself. But my passport no longer bears the name Sincere. It says Sean. I'm serious, I reiterated. If I have a way to leave you, then I have a way to make sure you can't find me. Victoria laughed as if teasing a dog. All right then, run. I'll give you 3 days and then I'll come find you, she said. I told you, as long as you call for me, no matter where I go, you'll find me. You won't lose me, she added. Won't I? Let's see about that, I said with a faint smile. 3 days before my flight, Ethan sent me a photo of Victoria at a beach barbecue. We're celebrating our love coming closer, he wrote. We're vacationing in the Maldives. I didn't reply. Instead, I invited a few close friends for one last gathering. After all, I might never see them again. I had a great time at the party. 2 days before my flight, Ethan sent another photo, this time of Victoria reading a book. The title? Baby's Early Education Guide. The new mom is really focused on her baby's education, Ethan wrote. Again, I didn't reply. I went to the bank, withdrew all my money in cash, converted it to euros, and closed all my accounts. One day before my flight, Ethan sent a video. It was a stunning display of fireworks over the ocean. She rented an entire island, Ethan wrote. She bought out all the fireworks in the Maldives just to celebrate my birthday. So, it's Ethan's birthday. A birthday coupled with a pregnancy, it must be a double blessing for the two of them. I watched the video and smiled faintly. Then I called a local charity. Hello, I have some clothes I'd like to donate to underprivileged communities, I said. The charity's representative soon arrived in a car. Victoria had been away for several days and I had already packed everything. 5 large bags of clothes and shoes, all donated. Not a single item left behind. As for my ID, household registration, degree certificates, and all my personal belongings, I took them to a crematorium and paid the staff to burn them all. Standing in the apartment I had lived in for 5 years, I felt a strange sense of detachment. The place was spotless, with no trace of me left. I had only one backpack with me containing my passport. If there was anything old I kept, it was the phone in my hand. I used it to call a cab to the airport. As the driver stopped at the terminal, I got a call from Victoria. Sincere, I'm back from my business trip. I'm heading home to pick you up so we can grab dinner together, she said. She was back, with Ethan by her side. From the car, I watched them walk out of the terminal together. Ethan was pushing a luggage cart with 2 suitcases, one blue, one pink, clearly a matching set. Victoria was holding onto his arm, leaning against his shoulder affectionately like a loving wife. On the phone, I asked her, was the trip tiring? Not too bad, she replied. By the way, today's the day I can finally open the gift you got me, right? Yes, I said. I'm so excited. You made me wait a whole week. I've been trying to guess what it is every day. It must be something very meaningful, especially for our wedding anniversary, right? It's very meaningful, I replied. You'll understand once you see it, she said. All right, I'll wait for you. I should be home in about 2 hours. 2 hours? That's more than enough. By then, my flight will already have left the country, I responded. Okay, she said. See you soon. Love you, Sincere. She hung up. I noticed Ethan frowning, clearly displeased, while Victoria stood on her tiptoes and kissed him lightly on the lips as if to soothe him. The driver's voice brought me back to the present. "Sir, you haven't paid your fare yet." I snapped out of my thoughts, scanned the driver's payment code, and transferred everything I had in my account to him. The driver looked at his phone, startled. "Sir, you must have made a mistake. The fare is $130, not $13,000. Let me refund you the difference." "There's no need," I replied as I opened the car door and stepped out. "I won't need it anymore. Thank you for bringing me here." "No problem," he said, though he sounded uneasy. "It's my job. You paid the fare, so of course I'll get you here." "It's not the same," I said. "You brought me to the path of my new beginning." I shut off my phone as soon as I got out of the car. I removed the SIM card and tossed it into a trash can. Then I handed the phone to a little girl nearby. Her face lit up. "Thank you, mister." I smiled and gently patted her head. "You're welcome." Her mother, looking embarrassed, protested, "This is far too valuable for us to take." "Are you heading abroad?" I asked. "Yes, we're going to Africa to find her father," she replied. "Then take it," I said. "You might need it when you're there." "Well, thank you," she eventually said. I waved goodbye to them. "Have a safe trip." The airport intercom blared overhead. "Attention, Sean. Please proceed to Gate H immediately. Your flight is about to depart." Gripping my passport, I took one last look back before resolutely heading to the boarding gate. Victoria, unaware of anything unusual, hung up the phone and carried on as if nothing had happened. It was Ethan who seemed unsettled. "Soon you'll belong only to me," he muttered with a hint of discontent. "But after that we'll have to go back to sneaking around." Victoria's eyes narrowed as she firmly warned him, "Don't let me catch you acting out in any way. You know the consequences." Ethan sighed. All right, you've said this 1,000 times." Seeing his frustration, Victoria softened her tone and reassured him, "All right, I won't bring it up anymore." Ethan shook his head. "You'll have to make it up to me. I'll buy you those sneakers you've been eyeing." "Which ones do you want?" she offered. Ethan perked up. "Let's go back to the office. Before you head home, let's have one last moment." Victoria frowned. "I already told Sincere I'd be home in 2 hours. There's no time." "Just say you got stuck in traffic," Ethan countered. "The highway to the airport is always jammed anyway." Victoria glanced at her watch, still hesitating. Ethan pulled her into a kiss. At first, she tried to push him away, but soon her resistance turned into an embrace. After the passionate kiss, her voice was hoarse as she chuckled. "Frisky." Ethan grinned. "Let's go back to the office. Think of it as one last wild moment for us." In response, Victoria grabbed his hand and led him toward the parking garage. "Your luggage," Ethan teased. "Forget it," she replied. They had their first round in the car and didn't stop until 2 hours later at the office. Only then did Victoria remember to call me. "The number you've dialed is currently unavailable," the automated voice informed her. Something felt off. I never turned off my phone. Just then, Ethan walked in with a cup of coffee he had prepared for her. Without hesitation, he wrapped his arms around her. "What's the rush? His phone probably just ran out of battery," he said, trying to please her. "Here, I made this coffee just for you. Let me feed you." Everything seemed normal, yet something felt amiss to Victoria. She couldn't pinpoint it, but she felt an inexplicable void, like something was missing. Even the coffee seemed to be at the wrong temperature. She frowned and stood up. "Forget it. Bring me some hot tea instead." Ethan leaned closer and teased, "What's this? Are you switching things up again?" That again made Victoria's heart sink. She lowered her voice. "Stop it. I'm not in the mood." "You're overthinking," Ethan said dismissively. What could he possibly be doing alone at home? This time, Victoria's patience wore thin. Her voice turned cold. "Go. Don't make me repeat myself a third time." Ethan quickly complied. Knowing his role was to be the obedient, doting type, he wouldn't dare to cross her. Even the assistant who came to deliver her schedule treaded lightly. "Vicky, you have a meeting this afternoon. It's starting soon," the assistant informed her. Victoria had initially planned to return home to see me and have dinner together before heading back to work. She had just enough time, but now the time she had spent fooling around with Ethan had eaten into her schedule. Glancing at the agenda, she asked without looking up, "How long will the meeting take?" The assistant quickly calculated, "About an hour." Victoria stood up. "I need to go home. If the meeting has already started by the time I get back to the office, there's no need to wait for me. Just follow the usual procedures." She didn't offer an explanation, simply grabbed her car keys and walked out, not even bothering to call the driver. This unsettled Ethan, filling him with a sense of crisis. He hurried to the office door, blocking her path and saying, "Aren't I here for you? Why do you need to go see another man?" Victoria, clearly in no mood for idle chatter, brushed his hand away and said curtly, "Don't ever say things like that again." Ethan, displeased, retorted, "No way, I just don't want to lose you to another man." The tension in the room was palpable, and the most nervous person was the assistant. Her eyes darted around as if looking for an escape route. If the floor-to-ceiling window could have opened, she might have jumped out from this 40-something story building just to get away. Victoria turned to Ethan, her expression growing solemn and her tone sharp with warning. "I told you from the very beginning to understand your place. Sincere is my husband, and that will never change." Ethan, feeling rebuked, fell silent. He thought to himself that the title of husband and Victoria's wealth would eventually belong to him. Patience, he reminded himself. You can't rush things. For now, he'd let it slide. Victoria hadn't been home during the day for quite a while. Standing in the familiar villa, she felt an odd mix of estrangement and novelty. They say distance makes the heart grow fonder. Perhaps that's why. "Sincere, I'm home," she called my name cheerfully as she walked through the garden and into the living room. The garden was meticulously trimmed, and the interior decor was unchanged and spotless, a testament to the household's taste and refinement. That was all thanks to me. Victoria wanted to embrace me and say, "Honey, thank you for all your hard work," but a quick glance around revealed no sign of me. She approached the part-time housekeeper who was working and asked, "Where's Mr. S? Did he go out?" At this time of day, I should have been home. The staff exchanged uneasy glances, unable to provide a definitive answer. "We don't know. We haven't seen him since this morning," they said. Victoria, displeased, pressed further. "You don't even know if he had breakfast." No one answered her question, though they all silently thought to themselves, "Shouldn't you, as his wife, be the one who knows his whereabouts? Why are you asking us?" Sensing the awkward tension, Victoria let out a sigh, dropped the matter, and said, "Fine. Asking you is pointless. I'll look for him myself." She assumed I was, as I often did during our school days, lazing around in bed on a leisurely morning. Treading softly, she went upstairs. But the bedroom was just as empty. The windows were open and sunlight filled the room, bathing everything in a warm glow. Yet amidst this cozy atmosphere, the one person who should have been there was missing. I was gone. Victoria instinctively walked over and noticed a letter tucked under a jewelry box on the vanity. It was my handwriting. On the letter, I had written just 2 sentences. "I know everything about you and Ethan. I'm leaving. Don't bother looking for me." There was no signature. Just like that, I ended a relationship that had lasted for years. What Victoria didn't know was that I had long since run out of words for her. She immediately called me, but I didn't answer. Clutching the letter tightly in her hand, she gripped it so hard that the edges crumpled into a distorted mess, though she seemed unaware. She persistently kept dialing my number, frantically searching every corner of the house at the same time. But whether it was my beloved flower garden in the backyard or the rooftop swing where we used to stargaze, I was nowhere to be found. I had truly left. "Sorry, the number you have dialed is currently unavailable." When she heard this message for the umpteenth time, reality finally sank in. I was not going to answer her calls. There must be another way. "Stay calm. Stay calm," she told herself, slapping her cheeks to bring herself back to focus. Finally, she opened her contacts and began calling our mutual friends. We had known each other for years, once a model couple who had gone from school uniforms to wedding attire. We were intimately familiar with each other's lives and social circles. Victoria first called one of my friends. The first 2 calls went unanswered, and on the third the friend finally picked up, though reluctantly. Upon hearing why she called, the friend let out a cold laugh and said, "You're his wife. If you can't find him, how would I know where he is?" Then they hung up. Victoria didn't have time to be upset about the rude response. She quickly moved on, calling other people, but the results were always the same. Most were polite enough not to outright scold her, but their tone revealed their dissatisfaction. Over the years, her relationship with my friends had visibly deteriorated. Unwilling to give up, Victoria pressed the last friend she called. "Are you saying no one has heard from him recently? If he's really leaving, surely he would have told someone about it, right?" The friend laughed dryly as though hearing a joke. "You're his wife. If even you couldn't pick up on any clues, why would he come to us? Maybe you should think back. Is there anything you've done recently that might have caused this?" Victoria fell silent. She hadn't sat down to have a proper conversation with me for a long time. If arguments were still an option for them, perhaps I wouldn't have reached the point of walking out. When she hung up on the last contact she could think of, a wave of panic began to take over her heart. The bedroom, like the rest of the house, was kept as it always was, but all of my belongings were gone. The more Victoria thought about it, the more panicked she became. She was afraid I had acted on impulse, that I might realize I was missing something while staying at a hotel, or worse, that I might be out of money while traveling. So she sat herself down by the swing and logged into her bank account to transfer money to me. She didn't even notice how much she was transferring, just that she kept adding zeros. She was genuinely afraid I might struggle while out there. Little did she know, I never needed her to support me. Soon a call came from the bank staff. "Ms. Vicky, all your recent transfer attempts have failed," the employee informed her. Victoria, teetering on the edge of collapse, had none of her usual composure left. She asked bluntly, "Is it because of transfer limits or frequency? I can prove this is my operation. I can provide verification codes and signatures right away. I need to send money to my husband." She couldn't recall the last time she personally transferred money to me. It seemed that a long time ago, wealth and a flourishing career had allowed her to offload many trivial matters. Our wedding anniversary decorations, handled by a planning company. Gifts, purchased by her assistant. Even household expenses for our shared life were set up on automatic deduction. These small things, insignificant on their own, had piled up to become the straw that broke the camel's back. Only now did Victoria belatedly realize how distant she had become from me without even noticing. Regret consumed her, and her desire to make it up to me grew stronger. But then the bank staff told her, "Ms. Vicky, there's no issue on your end, but the account you're trying to transfer to no longer exists." "Why?" she asked. "The card was canceled yesterday," the staff member replied. "Yesterday?" Victoria repeated, stunned. The employee confirmed it, and Victoria hung up the phone. She covered her face with her hands, letting out a sob. If only she had called me in the past few days, she might have noticed something was off. But she hadn't, and now it was too late. An hour passed quickly, but Victoria had no mind for work. Instead, she obsessively searched for any trace of me on the social media platforms I used. Perhaps somewhere on the vast internet, in a space no one knew, I had revealed a bit of my heart. Victoria wasn't in the habit of using social media, but she remembered my account name. On every platform, I would call myself Big Orange. She first opened the most commonly used app, but our chat history had long since frozen on a day from the past. As for my account, it had already been deactivated. My old profile picture was replaced by a gray default icon. It felt like a punch to her chest. Next, she searched for traces of Big Orange on other platforms. The results were either "this user does not exist" or accounts clearly registered by someone else. She scoured and searched tirelessly, but all she found were remnants of others sharing my past posts. The ID'd Big Orange had vanished without a trace. Unwilling to give up, she called the platform's customer service. Providing my personal information, she demanded, "I've read your platform rules. Deactivated accounts can be reinstated within 7 days. I want his data restored." The customer service representative refused. "I'm sorry, ma'am, the request must come from the account owner," Victoria protested. "I'm his wife. Can't I do it on his behalf?" "Apologies, ma'am," the representative replied politely. "Fine," Victoria snapped. "I'll file a complaint against you. Expect a court summons. Don't think I don't know you have this data in your back end. Restoring an account is not difficult." The representative responded calmly and courteously, "Please feel free to proceed." They had dealt with all sorts of difficult customers and were unfazed by her threats. Ultimately, these matters had to go through legal channels. Realizing she couldn't get through to them, Victoria deflated. Ending the call, she used her connections to get in touch with the platform's higher-ups. Softening her tone, she pleaded for their help. "I understand your rules," she said, "but my husband is missing. He left with nothing, not even his social accounts or bank cards. If you can't help me recover his data, I'll have no way to find him. I'm begging you." Victoria rarely had to lower herself, but for me, she had no choice. Thankfully, after confirming that her husband was indeed missing, the platform agreed to make an exception. Victoria finally regained access to my social media account. My profile picture was a self-portrait, exuding the same understated elegance as my personality and username. I wasn't a talkative person in real life, but surprisingly, I had documented years of my life online. I had been one of the platform's earliest users, and my very first post dated back to when we had just started dating. The first entry read, "We're together now," and was accompanied by a smiling emoji. The emoticons that were popular back then now seem outdated, but Victoria still smiled knowingly at them. Even after all these years, she could still feel the sweetness of our love from those days. For a time, I enjoyed sharing my life on that account, sketches I worked on during my free time, the gifts she gave me when we were dating, the wedding bouquet, and the carefully tended garden we created together after marriage. Victoria scrolled through each post, her heart softening as if a piece of it had caved in. But as she indulged in these memories of the past, she realized something. My posts had stopped. I no longer shared photos or updates about my life. The last post related to us was a picture of the starry sky taken from a rooftop swing. That was 6 months ago. What had happened back then? She tried to remember, and then it hit her. It was shortly after she started her affair with Ethan. She thought she had hidden it well, but apparently I had noticed the subtle clues. Overwhelming regret swept over Victoria. She mustered the courage to open my last written post. It was sent late at night and consisted of just 3 words. "This is it." There was no hidden meaning in that post, but she knew that those words were meant for her. By placing a period at the end of that sentence, I had also placed a definitive end to our relationship of so many years. Victoria drifted through the day in a daze. That night, the once warm and cozy home felt like a cold, lifeless building. She lay alone in bed, consumed by an overwhelming sense of emptiness. It was utterly unbearable. Her phone lit up several times beside her pillow. It was Ethan again, messaging her to ask her out. She ignored every single one. Victoria lay there until midnight, unable to sleep. Finally, she turned on the bedside lamp. If she couldn't sleep, she might as well stay awake. She moved over to the spot where I used to lie, trying to feel any lingering warmth. At least last night, I must have been lying here, right? She thought to herself, trying to recall the last time we had shared a bed. But her heart was colder than her body. The silk sheets felt smooth to the touch, but they warmed slower than cotton ones. Many years ago, when we had just graduated and couldn't afford such luxuries, we used to hold each other for warmth every night before falling asleep. Victoria suddenly missed me terribly. Her heart ached, as if it were being gripped tightly by an invisible hand. The alarm clock's chime at midnight snapped her out of her thoughts. She could no longer lie there. Suddenly, she remembered that I had left something for her, a beautiful jewelry box. She rushed to the vanity and picked it up. It was small enough to fit in the palm of her hand. But when she opened it, the contents were not exquisite jewelry but a small, misshapen lump of silver. At first, Victoria didn't understand. Why had I given her this? She instinctively rubbed the wedding ring on her left ring finger, the one she had personally crafted, and then it hit her like a bolt of lightning. That lump of silver, it was my wedding ring. I had melted it down. There is no greater sorrow than a heart that has died. Victoria finally accepted the reality. I wasn't just leaving home in a fit of anger. I wasn't coming back. Victoria no longer cared about celebrating her birthday. In the dead of night, she drove to the police station, breathless as she said, I need to file a missing person report. My husband has disappeared. He might have taken his own life. I am an adult. I come and go as I please, bound by no one. She needed a valid reason to file the report, otherwise the police would refuse to help. The officers accepted her report and stayed with her, searching until dawn. But it was all in vain. One male officer asked her, "Have you and your husband had any conflicts recently?" Victoria stammered, "No, we've always had a good relationship." The officer, experienced in such matters, immediately sensed she was hiding something. "If you truly want to find your husband," he said, "you need to tell us the truth. Otherwise, we won't be able to help you." She hesitated before admitting, I had an affair. He might have found out." Victoria's face burned with shame. This should have been proof of her allure, but in this moment she realized just how disgraceful it was, especially since my departure was because of it. The officer bluntly asked, "So your husband left because you cheated on him?" Victoria didn't answer, only nodding with a strange expression. Fortunately, a call from an unknown number saved her from further questioning. Clinging to the hope that it might be me, she answered. The voice on the other end introduced himself. "Hello, is this Miss Victoria?" "I am an attorney, Lawrence, representing Mr. S. I have something important to discuss with you. Would you be available to meet?" "Yes, I'm available. I'll come right away." Victoria didn't bother explaining to the police. She lied, claiming she had other matters to attend to, then drove as fast as she could to the meeting, running countless red lights and enduring curses from other drivers along the way. All she could think about was meeting the attorney and convincing me to come back. But when Lawrence handed her a divorce agreement, Victoria barely registered it. She glanced around the office, her eyes darting anxiously as she asked, "Where's Sincere? Does he still refuse to see me?" "I have something to say to him. Tell him to come out," Victoria demanded. Lawrence, the lawyer, replied calmly, "I'm sorry, I can't do that. Mr. Sincere didn't come at all. He has entrusted our law firm with full authority to handle the divorce proceedings. If you have any objections, you can tell me directly." Lawrence raised the hand holding the divorce papers, which finally caught Victoria's attention. Her face darkened instantly. She snatched the papers and barely glanced at them before tearing them into shreds. Throwing the fragments all over the floor in a fit of rage, she growled through gritted teeth, "I will never divorce him." Her eyes turned red as she emphasized, "Yes, I made a mistake, but who doesn't make mistakes? I've realized my faults. If he dislikes someone, I promise I'll never see that person again." "Isn't that enough?" she naively believed. "I love him so much. If we could just meet again, I'm certain I could move him." Lawrence gave a faint smile and reminded her, "Victoria, since you acknowledge that you are at fault, you should also understand that divorces aren't limited to mutual agreement. There's also contested divorce. Mr. Sincere has already stated that if you refuse, he will authorize me to file a lawsuit." Victoria asked, incredulous, "He doesn't even plan to tell me this himself?" She stared at Lawrence in disbelief, searching his face for any sign of dishonesty. But Lawrence maintained his polite smile and said, "Mr. Sincere made it clear that he doesn't want to see you. Whatever needs to be said, he's left in a letter." Victoria scoffed bitterly. "You call that a letter?" "He left me only 2 sentences, that's all. In any case, I won't sign it. I've already torn up the divorce papers. I want to see him in person." Her heart ached as if something vital had been forcibly ripped out of her chest. Lawrence had anticipated her reaction. Once she had calmed down slightly, he opened his folder and pulled out a second copy of the divorce agreement. Handing it to her, he said, "Mr. Sincere instructed this. He knew you'd tear up the first copy, so he prepared a second one." Victoria, enraged, snatched it and prepared to tear it apart again. With a serene smile, Lawrence reminded her, "Victoria, tear as many copies as you like. It doesn't matter. The original document has already been reviewed and signed by Mr. Sincere. We can print as many as needed. When you're tired of tearing them up, I'll just print another. And don't worry about the cost. It's all reimbursable." Victoria suddenly felt utterly drained of strength. Her demeanor shifted instantly and she pleaded, "I'm sorry for my earlier attitude. Could you please tell me where he is?" Lawrence remained unmoved. "I'm sorry, Victoria. I don't know." His words implied plainly, Mr. Sincere had no intention of seeing her, not even one last time. Victoria softened further, trying to negotiate sweetly. "How about this? If you tell me where Sincere is, I'll pay you. No, I'll pay you $5 million. Lawrence replied firmly, "Victoria, I can't disclose information my client wishes to keep private. $5 million is indeed a tempting offer, enough to start a new firm or even retire and live comfortably. But I prefer earning my money through legitimate work at my firm. Besides, I genuinely don't know where Mr. Sincere is. After entrusting me with this case, he's only contacted me by phone." Grasping at her last hope, Victoria said, "Then give me his current phone number. I'll pay you the same amount." Lawrence replied, "He's using the same number as before, but when I called him today, he didn't answer." His responses were flawless, leaving no room for questioning. The atmosphere in the room had grown icy. Victoria, seeing that Lawrence was immune to both her pleas and bribes, set her face in stone and declared, "Then we have nothing more to discuss. No matter how many copies you print, I'll never sign them. As for taking it to court, go ahead. I'll make sure to appear. Until then, I'll do everything in my power to earn his forgiveness." She clung to her belief that their years of love and countless shared memories would eventually soften his heart. As long as I refuse to divorce him, he'll come around one day, she thought. But Lawrence was prepared for this. Without hesitation, he began to explain the legal facts. "Victoria, Mr. Sincere doesn't even need to file a lawsuit against you. That's merely a last resort. If possible, he'd prefer an amicable separation. For example, if you live apart for over 2 years, the court can grant a divorce on the grounds of irreconcilable differences. I've already researched this extensively. Once I decided to end this relationship, I made sure to thoroughly consider every possible scenario and prepare solutions for them." Victoria was stunned. "That's impossible. He wouldn't be so heartless to me. We were so in love. How could he deny me over one mistake?" She conveniently ignored her own actions over the past 6 months, including how she had neglected him. Lawrence didn't care how she rationalized things. He simply emphasized the facts. "Victoria, arguing with me won't change anything. The law is the law. If you find it unreasonable, you can file a lawsuit against the legal system itself." Victoria knew she couldn't win, yet her stubbornness was unwavering. "As long as I can find Sincere during this period and reconcile with him, it should be fine, right?" The lawyer merely smiled without responding. After all, divorce attorneys had seen their fair share of heartbroken men and women. He could tell right away that Mr. S was resolute in his decision to leave. No matter how much Victoria struggled, it wouldn't change his mind. Just as Victoria and the lawyer were at an impasse, she received a call from the police. "Miss Victoria, based on the information you provided, we've located the last known signal from Mr. S's phone. Could you come over? I'm on my way." The divorce proceedings were temporarily set aside. Victoria had never heard of the location the police mentioned. She quickly entered the address into her GPS and sped off. When she arrived, all she could see was a desolate wasteland, no buildings, not even abandoned structures. The area was littered with trash, and police officers were combing through the scene. The sight struck Victoria deeply, and her mind immediately flooded with countless crime show scenarios. She nearly fainted from the shock. A passing officer steadied her and said, "Miss Victoria, please try to stay calm." Barely holding herself together, Victoria asked tremblingly, "Where is he? Have you found him? He must think I've hurt myself. I probably look like I could pass out at any moment, and I deeply regret everything. If I had known it would come to this, I wouldn't have told the police I was in danger. After all, I was simply leaving her behind." In a hoarse voice, Victoria said, "It's all my fault. He wasn't missing. He just doesn't want anything to do with me anymore. I've wronged him." Her words were incoherent, and she seemed utterly shaken. The officer assisting her looked puzzled as he listened to her rambling. He held up a bag and asked, "Miss Victoria, we didn't find Mr. S.'s phone, but we did recover a SIM card. Could you check if it's his?" Victoria snapped back to reality. Grasping at hope, she asked, "Just his SIM card? What about the phone?" The officer shook his head. "We've searched the entire area, but it's nowhere to be found." Victoria had been through an emotional roller coaster in such a short time, and it was clear she was not in a good state. She took the bag, looked at it, and asked, "Can I open it?" Upon receiving permission, she removed the SIM card from the evidence bag and inserted it into her own phone. She powered it on, curious about what I had been thinking when I left her, and wondering if I had any lingering feelings for her at all. The phone remained off, clearly out of battery. Victoria's fragile composure was hanging by a thread. She clung to her last shred of reason and pleaded with the police. "Could I borrow a charger? I'll go back to my car to charge it and return it as soon as possible." The officers didn't press her further. One of them asked around, and a kind male officer lent her a portable charger. "See if this works," he said. "The SIM card has been submerged in water for a while, though." The wasteland was overgrown with tall grass, and even in the autumn and winter months, dew still dripped from the leaves. Victoria refused to accept the possibility of failure. As she charged the phone, she silently prayed to every deity she could think of. Perhaps her sincerity paid off, because the phone screen lit up once it had enough charge. The first thing Victoria noticed was a long list of missed calls, nearly all from her to me. Aside from that, there were countless unread messages. Victoria opened them and froze. All the messages were from Ethan. She had always believed that Ethan and I had no private interactions, but the tone of his messages was completely different from how he behaved in front of her. It was as if he were a different person altogether. One message read, "Sincere, you know what Victoria is like. She's sentimental and doesn't want to lose face. As long as you're willing, she'll keep following you. But I think some things are better said outright. Love isn't about who came first. But if she had met me first, you two would probably just be distant acquaintances by now." Another read, "Men need to learn to have fun. Being too straightforward will make women find you boring. Being young isn't impressive, but Victoria, let's just say she has strong needs in that area, and I'm in my prime. I can satisfy her better than you ever could." And another, "By the way, this necklace Victoria gave me, she made it herself. You understand, right? We're truly in love. If you agree, you can keep the house as a breakup gift. Victoria will give me a new one anyway." There were many similar messages. None were long, and the wording wasn't particularly elegant, but he repeatedly addressed me as sincere, while constantly bringing up his age and Victoria in his arguments. The manipulative tone was so cloying it practically oozed through the screen. The male officer who had lent Victoria the charger happened to glance at a few of the messages. He sneered and looked at her with disdain. "For a man outside your marriage to send messages like this to your husband, even if you don't intend to divorce, it seems you're at least planning to start a new family on the side. I guess only you thought hiding it meant you cared about him the most," he said sarcastically. Victoria frowned deeply, her entire body feeling as though it had plunged into an icy abyss. But these revelations turned out to be just the appetizer. As Victoria scrolled further up the records, she discovered that Ethan had been regularly sending her photos. Pictures of gifts he had asked her to buy, screenshots of money transfers she had made to him in symbolic amounts like $520 and $1,314, and even inappropriate photos of the two of them leaning against each other while she was asleep. Looking at the images, Victoria suddenly felt a wave of nausea. She was utterly disgusted. The police officer beside her could easily piece together what had happened from her reaction. Sympathy, however, was in short supply. Forcing herself to hold it together, Victoria handed back the power bank to the male officer and, with a defeated expression, pleaded, "I'd like to go home. Please continue searching for Sincere's whereabouts. I can no longer call him my husband in front of others without shame." On the drive back, she called Ethan. Her voice was colder than he had ever heard before. "Where are you? Come to my house. We need to talk face to face." Ethan, overjoyed, replied, "When? Right away?" Victoria didn't bother responding and hung up. She was utterly drained and had no energy left to resolve matters elsewhere. As for the place she and Ethan had been staying, the very thought of it now made her sick. Despite not having eaten or even had a sip of water since the previous day, she couldn't bring herself to step foot there again. Ethan was faster than her. By the time she drove home, he was already there. Completely at ease, he had slipped effortlessly into the role of the man of the house, barking orders at the household staff. "Take down those paintings. They're hideous. If you're going to hang something, go buy a few valuable ones. Who wants to look at this trash? Oh, and the carpet needs replacing. I'll give you the name of a brand later, the most expensive, handcrafted one they've got. Otherwise, when my buddies come over, they'll think I'm faking it. And those flowers outside, rip them out. Replace them with the priciest ones you can find." He rattled off orders, keeping everyone so busy they barely had time to breathe. Meanwhile, he flitted around the house like a giant moth, touching this, poking that, even plucking leaves off the potted plants and tossing them aside. When he finally noticed Victoria's presence, he didn't stop. Grinning, he trotted over to her, hoping to please. "You're finally back. Have you decided where we're going to celebrate tonight? Personally, I think we should do it here. After all, I'm the man of the house now. Oh, and where's the chef? I want to order dinner." In front of her, Ethan was always like this, a childish, spoiled boy. He was vain and selfish, sure, but she had never thought of him as malicious. To Victoria, he was merely a fleeting amusement, someone to pass the time with. She never had any real expectations of him, so his shallowness never disappointed her. After all, she only enjoyed his adoration and youthful energy. But now, for the first time, she realized how gravely mistaken she had been. Her gaze turned icy as she asked, "What are you wearing?" Ethan, lost in his fantasy of becoming Mr. S's replacement, didn't sense the shift in her tone. He even spun around in the outfit, a set of pajamas worn over regular clothes, and said, "I found it in the walk-in closet. How does it look? Doesn't it suit me? I looked everywhere, and this was the only thing that fit." Victoria's eyes immediately flared with anger. "That's the sleepwear I bought for Sincere. He hasn't even worn it yet." Ethan completely misunderstood her meaning. Grinning foolishly, he wrapped his arms around her and said, "Doesn't that make it even more exciting? Victoria, what are you doing?" Before he could finish, Victoria, unable to tolerate him any longer, ripped the pajamas off his body. Ignoring his shouts, she didn't stop until the fabric lay crumpled on the floor. Not once did she look him in the eye. The household staff, who were only there to earn a paycheck, had no desire to witness such a scene. They all bolted, retreating to the garden as quickly as they could. Ethan, initially shocked, quickly recovered. Realizing they were now alone, he smirked knowingly. "Oh, I get it. You want me, don't you? I know exactly what you mean, and I'm here to satisfy you." As he spoke, he reached out to hug Victoria again, making no attempt to hide his intentions. After all, their relationship had always been about physical pleasure. There was no real affection between them, and thus no need for shame. As long as he could please her, she would shower him with money. Whether she saw him as a plaything or a lover didn't matter. All he cared about was the title of husband and the wealth that came with it. Ethan was still dreaming of marrying into a fortune, but Victoria's response was to shove him away and declare, "You don't deserve to wear his clothes, nor do you deserve to touch his things." Her eyes burned with fury, her disgust for him so intense that she couldn't bear to make physical contact. Ethan thought victory was in his grasp. Marrying Victoria seemed like a done deal. Once he got her on his side, he planned to whisper sweet nothings into her ear to push her into divorcing Sincere. He'd even gone to the trouble of dressing the part, wearing loose pajamas with nothing underneath. "You always liked me like this, didn't you?" he retorted, his face pale but still defiant. He bent down to retrieve the pajamas, only to have his wrist seized by Victoria. Her gaze was frosty as she demanded, "If you had even an ounce of shame, you wouldn't have sent those messages to Sincere. He would never secretly take photos of us together. I had warned him long ago not to flaunt himself in front of Sean. It was his fault that Sean left." She shifted all the blame onto Ethan, as if doing so could erase the pain she had caused me. When Ethan realized his actions had been exposed, his first reaction was to feign ignorance. "What are you talking about? Why would I send photos and messages to Sincere? I've been avoiding him, haven't I? Did he figure something out?" He clung to the idea that there was no concrete evidence against him. After all, who would believe that I would stay in this marriage even after discovering Victoria's infidelity? Victoria bit her lip and said coldly, "You're still lying. I must have been blind before, mistaking a worthless rock for a gem. But you're nothing but trash, dreaming of becoming legitimate? In my eyes, you're not even worth a speck of dust under his feet." Her fury over losing me was fully unleashed on Ethan. "Yes, it must be because of the messages you sent me that my love left. Even if she was at fault, it was only a secondary responsibility." For the first time, Ethan saw Victoria looking at him with such a chilling gaze. That only strengthened his resolve to deny everything. Crossing his arms and half covering himself, he said, "He must have made up those messages to set me up." As he spoke, he tried to head upstairs to change back into his clothes, but Victoria wasn't about to let him go. She grabbed him and pulled him back. Ethan, panicked, stammered, "Victoria, what are you doing?" This time, Victoria had no patience for his nonsense. She raised my phone and shoved it in his face. On the screen were explicit photos and taunting messages he had sent. Ethan hadn't expected me to show her the messages. Blurts of panic escaped his lips. "Wasn't he supposed to just bring up divorce directly with you?" Realizing his slip, he quickly tried to backtrack. I didn't mean to lie. I was just afraid of making you angry, that's all. Please forgive me this once. I only did it because I love you so much. If I didn't love you, I wouldn't have taken such a risk." Victoria cut him off with a cold laugh. "Love me? Or love my status and the family fortune? You know the answer better than anyone." She regretted deeply that she had driven me away because of a man like him. Ethan, hit where it hurt most, still refused to give up everything he'd invested in the relationship. Clinging to her sleeve, he pleaded, "Time reveals all truths. Don't you know by now if I'm genuine? I stayed with you for you. Do you think Sincere truly loves you? If he did, he'd be jealous and possessive of you. But him? He never even replied to me. I was helping you see the truth about him. Why else would I risk sending those photos?" "Shut up," Victoria snapped, her patience utterly gone. "You have no right to judge me. Besides, weren't you secretly hoping those photos would get out? You took such clear pictures of me, but conveniently left yourself out of them. Don't think I don't know. You've been planning to use this to force my hand into marriage, haven't you?" She was now painfully clear-eyed, but it was far too late. Ethan tried to argue further, but she was utterly repulsed by him and wouldn't give him even the slightest chance. She picked up her phone and called the security team at the estate. "Remove the person who doesn't belong here," she ordered. The security team, on our standby, arrived swiftly. Ethan refused to leave without a fight, struggling as he was dragged toward the door. "Victoria, you're the one who let me in. If you want me gone now, I'll leave immediately, but you can't treat me like this." Victoria turned her back to him, walking into the house without a glance, and threw out a single sentence. "Don't let me see you ever again." "Victoria!" Ethan shouted as he was dragged out of the estate gates. He watched helplessly as the ornately carved iron gates shut before him, a stark symbol of how the life of luxury he had been dreaming of was slipping further and further away. With tears in his voice, he began shouting at the top of his lungs, "Victoria, even without me he would have divorced you eventually. This isn't my fault." On this point, he and Victoria had reached a strange sort of consensus. Neither wanted to take responsibility. It wasn't until he heard the murmurs of passers-by that he realized what a spectacle he had become. What's with this guy? It's freezing and he's out here barely dressed. Kids these days playing such wild games, disgraceful. Didn't you hear him? He admitted it. Caused someone's divorce, then got kicked out after a fight with the wife. Man, he looks so normal. Why would he do something so shameless? He has hands and feet. Couldn't he find a proper job instead of leeching off someone rich? This kind of public drama was rare, and the onlookers weren't about to let it go to waste. They chatted among themselves while taking out their phones to record, not caring whether their videos might get flagged on social media. Ethan, still harboring dreams of climbing the social ladder, couldn't afford to ruin his reputation out here. Covering his face, he begged through the gate, "Victoria, Vicky, I'll leave right away, but at least give me some clothes." The security guard, hearing the commotion outside, went back to report to Victoria. "Miss Vicky, Mr. Ethan, he didn't get to finish before she shot him a sharp glare and said, "I don't want to hear another word about him." Her foul mood was visibly written all over her face. The security guard saw no reason to challenge someone causing such chaos in their employer's home and quickly held her tongue, choosing not to engage further. Outside, Ethan was screaming hoarsely for quite a while. Seeing Victoria remain so cold and dismissive, he finally abandoned his facade of weakness and hurt feelings. Instead, he began yelling like a street thug, hurling insults at her. "You think I actually care about you? Please. If you didn't make it so easy, do you think I'd even bother? You'll regret this one day, mark my words. Women like you are all the same, pathetic. You claimed I was your true love, but were you not just using that as an excuse to mess around with other men? Stop pretending to be all sentimental, it's laughable." He had completely dropped the act. Passers-by, who initially stopped out of curiosity to witness the commotion, now found themselves drawn in by the scandalous details pouring out of his mouth. They began gathering in greater numbers, intrigued by what kind of drama could lead to such a public meltdown. Ethan finally felt the sting of humiliation, his face flushing bright red. "What are you all staring at?" he snapped. "Mind your own business before I call the cops." But it was a weekday, and the bystanders were mostly retirees or neighbors who had come out to investigate the noise. His aggressive posturing did little to intimidate them. Some of the actual passers-by openly retorted, "You think we want to see this? You're the one who's made a spectacle of yourself. A kept man ruining someone else's marriage and now getting thrown out in disgrace? You should be ashamed of yourself." Exactly. Have some self-respect. A normal person would have gone into hiding long ago after a scene like this. Shame. That useless thing called shame. It was the second time in just a few hours that Ethan had been chided like this. His frustration boiled over, and he lashed out at the crowd with more insults. "Who's calling me a kept man? Who said it?" The onlookers only laughed harder. "If you're not a kept man, then what are you? If that woman actually cared about you, would she have kicked you out onto the street half naked? You're just a plaything, and you actually thought you were something more? These houses cost a fortune. Don't tell me you thought you'd cash in and stay. Looks like you played your cards wrong." These cutting remarks left Ethan's face pale, then red, then pale again. He looked utterly humiliated. Without the confidence to keep posturing, he shrank back, wanting to escape the crowd's jeers. But before he could make his getaway, a middle-aged man, recently divorced after discovering his wife's affair, stepped forward, blocking Ethan's path. With obvious disdain, he shouted, "You're young and able. Why waste your life being a homewrecker? Disgusting." A kept man. Ethan, unwilling to be outdone, shot back, "Old man, take a look at yourself. With that face of yours, you couldn't be a kept man even if you wanted to. Maybe you're just jealous because your wife cheated on you. Isn't it because you couldn't satisfy her in bed?" The man spat in anger. "Pah! At least I don't get thrown out naked and humiliated like this. You've got no dignity." Furious, the man lunged at him, trying to grab him, and the scene quickly descended into chaos. Being a local, the man soon rallied a group of neighbors to join in berating Ethan. "Shameless! A kept man with no morals!" The commotion drew even more onlookers, who wasted no time calling their friends to come and witness the drama. Very soon, a large crowd had gathered, and the noise was so loud that it could be heard from inside the nearby mansion. Yet Victoria remained unmoved, fully immersed in her own world and unwilling to come out. No matter how much Ethan screamed, cursed, and flailed around, he was no match for the sheer number of people hurling insults at him. Frustrated and on the verge of tears, he tried to shield his face and escape the crowd, only to nearly be groped by a lecherous elderly woman taking advantage of the chaos. "Get lost! Don't touch me!" he shouted angrily. Realizing he couldn't rely on Victoria anymore, he instinctively scanned the crowd for someone else to latch onto. Having long grown accustomed to relying on others, it never occurred to him to stand on his own 2 feet. He assumed the men in the crowd were all jealous of him, and instead set his sights on the few older women who were eyeing him with interest. Wiping away his tears, he adopted a pitiful expression and called out, "If anyone helps me, I'll sleep with you, male or female, I don't care." A few wealthy-looking older women in the crowd, already eyeing him with interest, began to step forward, ready to assist. But as soon as they did, their companions pulled them back. "Stop right there. Watching the drama is one thing, but you'd seriously consider taking in someone like him? If he's willing to offer this, he clearly doesn't care about himself. He's just trash." "Exactly, he's young and already so shameless. Who knows, maybe he was kicked out because he caught something nasty. He might even be out here to spread it. We should call the police." At that, the crowd quickly dispersed, moving far away from him. Even the middle-aged man who had been wrestling with him earlier clapped his hands as if dusting off something filthy. Ethan had always prided himself on using his body to get ahead, but now, seeing everyone treat him like a pariah, he finally realized the extent of his humiliation. The iron gates of Victoria's mansion remained tightly shut, showing no sign of opening. Left with no other options, Ethan wrapped his arms around himself and, in a panic, fled back toward his own place. On the way, a stray dog started barking ferociously at him, causing him to stumble into the nearest alley in fear. Woof! The stray dog chased after him as he ran. Ethan ran like his life depended on it, too terrified to stop. He darted through narrow alleyways to avoid the stray dogs chasing him, his legs burning as he pushed forward. When the barking finally faded into the distance, he realized he had no clue where he was. His phone and jacket were left behind at the villa, which meant he couldn't even call for help. He didn't know which way led back, and all around him was desolation, abandoned houses that even vagrants avoided. Shivering in fear, he shrank into himself, trying to steer clear of any potential danger while shouting desperately into the night. "Help! Is anyone there?" Only the sound of the wind answered him. That night, Ethan had no choice but to walk all the way back on foot. Along the way, he endured countless strange looks, his disheveled appearance drawing suspicion. If it weren't for a kind passerby who called the police after seeing him wandering the streets in nothing but his undershirt. After dark, he might have spent the entire night lost in the wilderness. But this was just the beginning of his downfall. The termination letter reached his home faster than he did, and in the days that followed, his reputation was utterly destroyed as his misadventures went viral online. Ethan had become a laughingstock, a man too disgraced to show his face in public. Victoria was true to her word. After kicking Ethan out of her home, she erased him from her mind entirely. That night, she sat alone on the couch until morning, staring blankly into the darkness. It wasn't until someone came to report to her that she finally stirred. "Vicky, we found a witness at the airport who claimed they saw Mr. S boarding a flight." Victoria froze. "I checked the passenger lists for all the flights that day. His name wasn't on any of them. The person hesitated before replying. Oh, then maybe the witness was mistaken. It could have been someone who just looked a lot like him. This lead might be a dead end. I'll think of other ways. Wait a second. Come back, Victoria interrupted. We can't ignore any potential clues. Which flight did the witness say Sincere boarded? It was a flight to Norway. Book me a ticket to Norway immediately, she said with newfound determination. Victoria sprang into action. She didn't even bother changing her clothes, instead grabbing her documents and rushing out the door. Her heart was racing, but getting a visa and booking a flight took time, and by the time she set foot on Norwegian soil, 3 days had already passed. Through the embassy and local police, she finally tracked down my location. She knocked on the door of an apartment and, without waiting for an answer, called out my name and barged in. To her surprise, she was stopped by the landlord, who was tidying up the place. The man looked on guard. Who are you? I'm looking for Sincere, she said, realizing too late that I had been using an English name here. She quickly corrected herself. He's my husband. There's been a misunderstanding between us, and I need to clear things up with him. The landlord shook his head. There's no one here by that name. He's called Sincere. His English name is George. The landlord still refused. My tenant's name is Sean, not whoever you're talking about. You've got the wrong person. Sean? Victoria was stunned. Are you sure you're not mistaken? The landlord frowned, clearly annoyed. If you don't believe me, that's your problem, he said, starting to close the door. Desperate to keep the lead alive, Victoria pulled out a wad of cash. Take this as a tip for him. Just tell me when he moved in and if he's been in contact with anyone. The landlord took the money but remained tight-lipped. She left empty-handed, her voice heavy with despair. Victoria had been riding a wave of emotional highs and lows recently, and this blow left her utterly defeated. She waited outside for what felt like an eternity, hoping for any sign of me, but it was as if I had vanished into thin air, leaving no trace behind. With no other options, she returned home in a daze. From that day on, Victoria stopped going to the office. She shut herself inside her home, cutting herself off from the world. When her assistant called to report on work matters, she would interrupt with a single question. Any updates on Sincere? No, none yet, the assistant stammered. We've put out missing person notices as you instructed, but there's been no news so far. Hearing this, Victoria didn't react with anger or give any further instructions. Instead, she sounded eerily calm. All right, I understand, she said before hanging up. The assistant was left shaken, sensing that something was terribly wrong. He began calling her daily to check in, but with each passing day, her responses grew shorter. At first, she would say, I understand, or keep going. Eventually, all she said was, Alarm bells went off in his head. He feared that the stress had pushed Victoria to the brink, that she might lock herself away and waste away in despair. In a panic, he contacted Victoria's parents and urged them to check on her. Liz and Lawrence immediately rushed to her villa. The staff were still following the routines I had set up before leaving, and everything seemed to run like clockwork, except there was no sign of Victoria. Liz, deeply worried, stopped one of the housekeepers. Where's my daughter? Why isn't she coming out? Victoria had always come out to greet them whenever they visited, but today she hadn't even picked up their calls, let alone shown herself. The housekeeper pointed upstairs, her face pale. Miss Victoria has locked herself in her bedroom. She told us not to disturb her. Liz's concern deepened. Has she not come out at all? No. What about food? Haven't you brought any up to her? She refuses to eat or drink, the housekeeper replied. We were at a loss, knowing full well that anyone who dared knock on her door would be scolded. Victoria's parents exchanged worried glances, realizing the gravity of the situation. Victoria had been living in complete isolation recently, and although her bedroom door wasn't locked from the inside, their persistent knocking yielded no response. Out of desperation, they simply pushed the door open, and the sight before them left them utterly stunned. The bedroom floor was strewn with scattered sheets of paper, leaving almost no room to step. Victoria sat cross-legged on the floor, her head bent low as she scribbled furiously in a notebook. Despite being in a room flooded with sunlight, she exuded an eerie and oppressive aura. Victoria's father bent down to pick up a few sheets and found that every single one of them bore the same repeated phrase, "I was wrong." Victoria's mother was instantly overcome with a chilling sense of dread. She approached Victoria, taking a closer look, and saw her daughter's bloodshot eyes and trembling hands clutching a pen, still relentlessly writing that same phrase. Tears began streaming down her face. "What are you doing?" her father demanded as he snatched the pen and paper from her. "What's the point of writing all this? We already know what happened. How could you have done such a thing?" Victoria raised her head to look at her father, whose disappointment was palpable. Covering her face with her hands, she said, "It's all my fault. I've let Sincere down. I couldn't resist temptation and betrayed him. But I will write all of this until he knows how deeply I regret it." The sheets of paper strewn across the floor were made of the same material as the stationery I had once given her. She had taken the unused notebooks from my study and moved them to her bedroom, where she had been writing day and night for several days. Time had completely lost meaning for her. Victoria's mother, through tears, said, "Sincere doesn't want to see you. Even if you fill this entire room with apology letters, what's the use? You should tell him these things in person." Victoria paused to think and admitted that her mother had a point, but she had become so fixated on her guilt that she couldn't pull herself out of it. Raising her bloodshot eyes, she insisted, "He will know. If I finish all of this, he will forgive me. My sincerity will shine through." Her voice was hoarse, but her tone was unusually fervent, her eyes unnaturally bright. Before finishing her sentence, she suddenly stood up, snatched the notebook back, and resumed writing with her trembling hand, muttering to herself, "I was wrong. You will forgive me, won't you? If I fill all these notebooks, you'll come back. I'm sorry." Victoria repeated these words tirelessly, her mother watching helplessly as her daughter appeared to descend into madness. Between sobs, her mother pleaded, "Please, I'm begging you, stop this. If you keep starving yourself and writing like this, you'll end up killing yourself." No matter how much her mother begged, Victoria remained unmoved. She tried to wrest the notebook away from her daughter, but her strength was no match. In the end, it was Victoria's father who couldn't bear it any longer and came up with an idea. "You want to apologize to Sincere, don't you? Then he needs to see your sincerity. How about this? There's a popular TV show right now that helps people reconnect. You can sign up for it and apologize to him on camera in front of the audience. That show has a huge following right now, and with your reputation as a young and talented woman, it's bound to get attention. Maybe, just maybe, he'll see your apology somewhere in the world." Victoria immediately signed up for the show, even investing additional funds to secure a spot as a featured guest on the latest episode. Sensing the juicy drama of her marital scandal, the production team ramped up their promotional efforts, ensuring the episode became a hot topic before it even aired. Victoria didn't bother concealing her emotions but made an effort to clean herself up for the program. Before leaving the house, she deliberately chose the first dress I had bought for her after we got married, a time when our love was at its peak. Every morning back then, we'd exchange a kiss goodbye before heading off for the day. But as time went on, those beautiful moments were eventually destroyed by her own actions. The studio audience was packed, drawn by the allure of this scandalous drama. The host, noticing Victoria's weary and gaunt appearance, began probing into the reasons behind her marital breakdown with subtle questions. To their surprise, Victoria was startlingly direct, laying out the full story without hesitation. "I'm here today to say sorry to my husband," she began. "I broke my promise. When we first got together, I told him so many sweet words, believing we'd grow old together, filled with love as always. But I didn't expect to succumb to temptation and make such a terrible mistake. The problems in our marriage are entirely my fault. I was the one who cheated, and that's why he left. Today, I'm here, hoping he'll give me a chance to ask for his forgiveness." Victoria spoke with raw emotion, her regret and remorse laid bare for all to see. By the end, her voice was choked with tears. The video, amplified by the show's promotional efforts, quickly went viral, sparking widespread discussion across forums and social media. Some internet sleuths even dug up my old artwork and identified Ethan, the third party involved in this scandal. But amidst all the noise, there wasn't a single word from me. Victoria waited for days, clinging to faint hope. Finally, she forced herself to muster some resolve. Victoria called her assistant and said, "I remember there's a video section on the company's official website. Upload my apology video there and leave it indefinitely until there's news about Sincere." Her assistant thought this was taking things too far, practically dragging both herself and the company's reputation through the mud. But knowing better than to argue, he only asked, "Should it go on the main office's website or the branches too?" "All of them," Victoria replied. Feeling that still wasn't enough, she added, "Don't we have advertising slots on social media? Buy those as well, both domestic and international platforms. Top headlines only. If anyone knows where he is, they can contact me. Oh, and put my personal number out there too." A simple missing persons announcement turned into a massive media storm, fueled by her identity and the drama behind it. Victoria believed that after all this effort, even if I saw her haggard face on a broadcast, I'd choose to call her and have a proper conversation. But I never contacted her, not once, even though she kept her phone on 24/7 and had the ringer volume cranked up to the max. All she could do was wait. Days later, the first call from an unknown number came in. The caller's first question was, "Is the reward in the missing person announcement real?" "Of course," Victoria replied. "All right," the person said. "Send me 10 grand and I'll tell you where I saw him yesterday." Victoria asked, "You saw him yesterday?" "Yeah." "Hurry up and transfer the money," the caller demanded. Without hesitation, Victoria wired the money. Her rationality had long been crushed by overwhelming despair. Only after the caller vaguely gave her a domestic address did she realize she had been scammed. She hung up with a bitter smile but didn't pursue the matter. She didn't have the energy for it. After that, the calls didn't stop. Each one claimed to have seen me somewhere, demanding rewards ranging from modest to exorbitant amounts. Victoria knew many of them were scammers, but she kept sending money anyway, clinging to the faintest sliver of hope. The so-called rewards ultimately disappeared without a trace, leaving not even a ripple in the water. But Victoria didn't care. She was sustaining herself on this fragile hope. Even when someone suggested meeting in person, she obliged. Among those who sought her out were men with ulterior motives, sleazy types who didn't even bother to mask their intentions. "Miss Victoria," one of them said bluntly, "I have plenty of buddies. If you're feeling lonely, we can keep you company." They were essentially male escorts shamelessly offering their services. Victoria didn't even dignify them with a response beyond a single word, "Leave." Eventually, even the scammers stopped calling. Her phone sat quietly by her side for days, more silent than she was. A month passed and tragedy struck at home. One afternoon, the housekeeper noticed that Victoria hadn't left her bedroom all day. Even when they knocked, the usual response, telling them to leave her alone, was absent. Nervously, they pushed the door open and found her unconscious on the carpet, barely breathing. Alarmed, they called for an ambulance and rushed her to the hospital. Victoria's parents, Mr. and Mrs. Vicky, seemed to have aged decades in just a few short weeks. They waited outside the emergency room, looking as though they might collapse any moment. Then the doctor came out with grim news. The patient collapsed due to dehydration and malnutrition. Additionally, she suffered a miscarriage. This is a psychological issue and it's quite severe. Without immediate treatment, she may become suicidal. Mrs. Vicky fainted on the spot upon hearing this. Mr. Vicky wanted to collapse too, but with both his wife and daughter needing him, he forced himself to stay upright, signing the paperwork and paying the medical bills. Once their condition stabilized, Mr. Vicky recorded a new video from Victoria's hospital room. His hair was now stark white, and tears streamed down his face as he pleaded with me to return, to save Victoria's life for the sake of old times. Meanwhile, across the ocean, I was oblivious to all of this. I had left to sever all ties with the past, including anything related to Victoria and her company. In the snowy woods of Norway, lived in a small cabin. During the harsh winter, most of the town's residents stayed indoors, enjoying the snow from the warmth of their homes. I did the same, setting up my easel by the window to paint the serene, snow-covered landscape. Occasionally, I'd sip from a steaming cup of coffee I had brewed myself. At my feet was a newly adopted kitten, a clingy little creature that loved to snuggle. It meowed and jumped onto my lap, demanding affection. Just then, there was a knock at the door. I had no choice but to pick up the kitten and answer it. Standing outside was Lisa, my landlord, here for a visit. I stepped aside to let her in. "This little one is so needy," I said, holding the kitten. "I had to bring it with me." "No problem," Lisa said with a smile. "It's adorable." She held up a bag she had brought. "I baked some cookies at home and thought I'd share them with you." "Thank you," I said, pouring her a cup of coffee in return. In this quiet little town where life was simple and winters were slow, it wasn't uncommon for neighbors to drop by for a chat. In just 1 month, Lisa and I had become close friends. As we chatted, Lisa shared some news with me. "Sean," she began, "I came across a video on social media, an apology video from a woman. She also posted a missing person notice with a photo that looked a lot like you, along with her contact information. I was curious if you had seen it. To be honest, the person in the photo looked more and more like me the longer I stared at it. But Lisa remembered how I'd rarely checked social media since moving here, and thought I might be hiding something. So she changed her approach and asked more tactfully. I laughed and said, "Really? What a coincidence. But honestly, my appearance is pretty average back where I come from. Running into someone who looks like me wouldn't be that surprising." That was a denial, plain and simple. Lisa glanced at my unmistakably East Asian features and, of course, understood what I meant. But she chose not to press the matter further and instead shifted the topic. "Actually, it's not just that woman," she said. "Her parents have also posted videos, claiming that her life has become miserable. She lost her child, and now she's on the brink of death. I have to admit, Victoria's performance in those videos is really moving. Even people who don't understand the language could feel her despair through her expressions and the subtitles." I responded, "That's impossible." I cradled the little kitten in my arms, my lashes lowered as I continued, "Every person is an independent individual. No one should have to rely on someone else to survive. If she truly gives up on herself because of this, then there's nothing anyone can do. You can't sacrifice someone else just to complete her." My mind was set. Even if Victoria herself stood in front of me, crying her heart out, I wouldn't turn back. Lisa smiled faintly and replied, "That's good to hear. You can rest easy living here. The heavy snow in the forest has blocked the roads to nearby cities for now. Even if someone mistook the two of you for the same person, they wouldn't have the chance to reach out and cause confusion." Warmth swelled in my chest. I took a bite of the freshly baked cookies, my eyes welling up as I said, "Thank you. The cookies are delicious. Really." Time flowed like water, and before I knew it, Christmas Eve had arrived. It was a big day for the residents of this little town. Many young people working elsewhere would make an effort to return home and reunite with their families. I lived alone in a cabin. To prepare for the holiday, I bought some fresh flowers from nearby and hung up a painting I'd recently finished. Lisa, ever thoughtful, came by to extend an invitation. "Hey, Sean," she said. "My sister Anna is coming home tonight. It's just the two of us, and it feels a bit lonely. Would you like to celebrate with us?" Since no one else had invited me, I couldn't think of a reason to decline. I carefully selected some flowers, brought along the kitten, and carried a pot of hot coffee to Lisa's house. Lisa lived alone most of the time, so having a male friend around her age seemed to brighten her mood. She gestured toward the decorations scattered across the floor, saying apologetically, "These are all things my sister bought. She wanted to help set them up when she got home, but it looks like we'll have to handle it ourselves." The Christmas tree was nearly 6.5 feet tall, standing beautifully by the fireplace. But reaching the top to place the star was no easy task. I didn't mind. "It's fine," I said. "Just give me a chair and a stool. I'll take care of it." Being a head taller than Lisa, I had no trouble reaching the top of the tree by standing on the makeshift tower. Together we decorated the tree in no time, giving it a wonderfully festive look. Lisa couldn't help but grumble. "I really don't know what Anna is up to. First, she forgot to buy the string lights, and now she's been out for ages without bringing anything back. She'd better not tell me she got lost." I glanced at the clock and said earnestly, "It's still early. As long as she makes it back in time for the turkey, it's fine." "Oh my God, the turkey!" Lisa suddenly remembered the oven was still running and dashed into the kitchen. She had her hands full. I chuckled helplessly and continued hanging ornaments on the Christmas tree. When I heard the door open, I walked over to answer it. A pretty, cheerful young woman stood outside. Thinking it was Lisa, she excitedly held up the string lights and exclaimed, "I got the lights." Her words abruptly stopped when she realized she was speaking to a stranger. Our eyes met, and while I didn't think much of it, I smiled and explained, "You must be Anna. I'm your sister Lisa's tenant. She's in the kitchen working on the turkey and should be out soon." Anna's bright eyes lingered on me, her expression dazed. She didn't react until Lisa called from the kitchen, "What are you standing around for? Come help me carry the turkey." Snapping out of her trance, Anna scurried into the kitchen with the string lights, looking as flustered as a kitten. A moment later, she returned at Lisa's prompting and handed the lights to me, avoiding eye contact the entire time. A soft blush spread across her fair skin. That Christmas Eve, the three of us sat around the Christmas tree sharing turkey and holiday cookies. During the gift exchange, Anna finally mustered the courage to meet my gaze with her blue eyes. She asked, her voice sincere, "Would you be my boyfriend?" There was no flourish, no clever phrasing, just the simplest form of confession. I slid the Christmas gifts I'd prepared for the sisters across the table and said, "I'm sorry. I think I'll be leaving here someday." "Where will you go?" Anna asked. "Far away," I replied.